Hey guys, welcome back to my workbench. Dan here, and in this video I want to talk about some of the advanced weathering you can do for something like a boxcar. In this case I have a Tangent, what is this? This is an 86 or 89 foot Auto Parts boxcar. So this is from the release where they had the DOT stripes, kind of a mid-2000s repaint I'd say. And I don't have any actual pictures of this exact car number. However, I was able to use similar photos online of similar cars in this condition to replicate some of the weathering, and then I got some of the graffiti on it. Anyways, at this point in time with this car, I want to do some heavier rust streaking. If you actually pay attention and look real close at this model, and we'll zoom in here a little bit, you can see I actually have gone in and I've done a little bit of oil work to the sides as preparation, and I've done a little bit of oil streaking down the sides of the car. You can see all the very fine streaks. That's pretty normal weathering work. That's just taking and adding the streaks of oils and then blending them down with a little bit of thinner and a flat brush. That's basic stuff. That's pretty straightforward, what we normally do on this channel in terms of weathering. But the thing with these darker cars that you'll notice a lot of times is that the rust usually is a lot brighter tone in comparison to what's on this model here. Now, I could leave this model like this. However, with the rust that's on there, I'm just not very satisfied. It looks flat, kind of one-dimensional. I really want to make this car pop because, as you guys know, any of you CSX modders, these 89-foot cars get very rusty, and you can really see the pronounced rust. And real quick, I'm going to try to pull up a prototype photo, and though this is not a CSX painted car, it does give you a good idea of what I'm talking about. This is one of the original chassis cars, and you'll see how you have the mixture of dark rust and then you have that really bright rust. Now, granted, this car has been very heavily faded down, but what happens is, even on these repaints, the rust starts to reaccumulate down the sides of the cars very quickly, and it ends up eating back through the paint, and it all comes up from this roof because these roof panels rust like crazy, and you get these very bright rust streaks that come down. And again, because this car is now a darker color, it's harder to actually show those rust streaks because of them being a darker, more subtle color. So the answer to making more of these rust streaks where it actually looks more pronounced and you have better color is to use pigments, powders, things like that. Now, let me go ahead and insert this guy. This is one I've obviously been using for a while. It's AIM Products Weathering Powder. And this stuff works good wet or dry, but the technique I actually want to show you is something I've never really done before on a model like this, but it's the best solution to achieve the weathering I want for this boxcar. With this product, you can buy it, it's relatively affordable, and you can either mix this with a little bit of water and stretch it out, or you can use it dry. Now, the downside to using it dry, straight out of the cap like this, is, yeah, you'll get a nice bright vibrant color, but over time the color will fade, it will start to peel off a little bit, and it's also not very friendly to clear coating and sealing in place, so that's something you got to keep in mind. The benefit with doing this with water is that not only can you now basically make this like a pigment style wash or a paste, it's easier to apply that way, it's easier to blend, but you can also flat coat over this, and for the most part that color is pretty well preserved. I've experimented a little bit with it and I'm pretty happy with the results, so I want to go ahead and make a video now showing you guys how I do actually a wet wash with these weathering powders. And I'm going to be using this color only, but obviously this can apply to all kinds of different tones, mud tones, dirt tones, earth tones, brighter rust tones like more of a fresh rust, all kinds of stuff like that. It works great for these models, especially again these darker colored boxcars because the rust really pops out when you do it this way. Before I actually apply the powder wash, what I want to do is apply a few rust dots. I'm using a long tip brush and I'm just going to go in and start painting on a few little dots of paint just here and there so I can do some rust spots later on, because you can actually do some amazing rust spot techniques using this method. So I want to go in and just apply a few, mainly at the base of the car, around the doors especially, because the doors get really pitted. Remember, around the door tracks in particular, these areas are usually going to get a lot of spots of rust. A lot of pitting too, because you think that those doors are always impacting the sides. Stuff gets banged up against the side all the time too, so that's something to keep in mind. So I'm just going to go in here and add a few dots to prep up, and then we'll actually get started with the main technique. So most of the time more experienced modelers that do work with pigments, powders like this in this fashion, they usually will have a mixing plate, and they'll usually mix the colors inside that little palette. But in this case, I'm actually just going to use a little cap because I don't need that much powder. And keep in mind, with these powders, a little goes a long way. I just scooped a little bit into this cap, and now I'm going to activate it with a little bit of water. So we're going to get to watch the magic happen here. I just take a little bit of this water like this. Alright, now in the past what we're used to is making a thin wash. We're actually going for more of a paste. Alright, so this is going to be a pretty concentrated color, and the key with this to make a nice thick paste. Have a little look at that consistency. Notice it? It's almost like oil. A little bit. You can mix a little bit more pigment there if you want, make it a little bit drier. Just like that. Okay. That's pretty good. Notice that I'm keeping the tip of this brush very, very sharp. Alright? Fine tip application is the key. Now, remember with these box cars, there's these little strips, just like a hopper car that has walkway supports, where you'll have a defined streak. At each one of these points, there's a defined streak. Generally, with any kind of rust streaking, you want to start at those places where there's going to be the most pronounced rust. And you're going to take and you're going to add a streak to each one of these little posts. Alright, so just like this. And these pigments go a long way too. Powders rather. You can keep blending them. Take a little bit more up. If the line's not perfect, don't stress too much. It's okay. It's not a big deal. I'm going to keep working that down like that. Now, I'm going to actually add a few little rust dots. Just here and there. Again, the fine tip paintbrush is the best for this kind of thing because you can get right in there. Now what I'm going to do is add some other little streaks, maybe some finer streaks here and there. Blend things out, because remember there's going to be a lot of streaking coming from this roof. So you can kind of blend this out. And again, it doesn't look very good, does it? You know, it's not going to be very very defined. Alright, let's get in here a little bit closer. Alright, you can kind of see what we're going for here. Get a little bit more water. And again, with this pigment, you can keep stretching this stuff out. It's very, very forgiving. It'll dry out. All you got to do to reactivate it, add a little bit more water. It's very simple. Don't worry about what's building up on top around that roof. We'll worry about this later. We're going to deal till that. We're not worried about it right now, though. Now what I'm going to do, go back, start adding a little bit more. Just go back in and fill in some of these rust dots. Knock them out real quick. Rust pits, I should say. These cars get these all over the place. Especially like that chassis one I showed you. Those are even worse, man. I've seen some of these where every square inch of the car is pitted to hell. They get absolutely freaking trashed. A little bit more. Just keep adding as many streaks as you want. Again, remember, I don't have a specific prototype photo I'm using. I'm just doing this kind of at my own free will here as an example. Just go in and add that. Now, you'll notice again, it's pretty chunky. Doesn't look crazy yet. Now, normally I would use a brush like this, but I really don't want to overwork this powder. It's very important that we really only focus on one little bit at a time. Now what I'm going to do is take this smaller brush, right? It's a little bit of a stiff bristle brush. I'm going to take some of the water that I just got out of this bowl, and I'm going to just kind of dry it out on a napkin, similar to what you would do with an oil. And now what I'm going to do is come in here, and I'm going to start streaking down. There's too much water. See, it's got to be kind of dry. You don't want to pick up a whole bunch of this right away. You got to kind of expect that it's going to want to pick up a lot pretty quick. Now transfer the brush to your rust streaks. You can start at the top, but as you keep working these, pay attention to what you're doing. Start working at the bottom of the streak and not at the top. No, no, no. You want to make sure that you're not pulling more of that pigment down. Stretch it out to what you need it to be, and then stop, and then start working the base. Refine that line a little bit, because if you keep working at the top of that streak, you're going to keep pulling that pigment away from the top. And you got to remember that with rust, it's always going to be more concentrated right at the top. There's going to be a lot more color. This is something where you want to blend it out from the bottom, start from the top, and then work it down from the bottom like this. And notice that that streak starts getting a little bit larger as you go. Alright, and you can kind of adjust the brush, sharpen that line a little bit. You can see it gives you a lot of play. And it's also great with this too, it has the same characteristic like oil paint, where I can go back and I can keep playing with this if I want. Like if I'm not satisfied with these streaks that I did over here, I just reactivate it with a little bit of water. I can go right back to it. Here you can see the effect in a nutshell and how it streaks down, but notice how much more it pops. So there's the finished side essentially, and then the unfinished side. There's a big difference. You can see that this has the rust that we need. Obviously it needs a little bit more cleaning up. This is a rough demonstration for the video, but we also got to do some work to the roof to blend this all out. We'll worry about that. Later. So the other area you're going to see a lot of this rust streaking is on that door. There's going to be a lot of the rust that starts coming down from the track. It starts kind of accumulating in the corner. Trying not to get in the way of the camera here. It's just a little difficult. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some various little lines just here and there so we can start enhancing some of these little areas. But again, the door is going to generally be a really good area you want to concentrate this rust on. You just kind of mix it up, and again you'll notice that I'm really not doing an insanely great job. I'm actually going pretty crazy, but it's all for the sake of demonstration here. Now I'm going to take my brush again and I'm just going to come back in, make sure it's not too wet like that. I'm going to sharpen the edge a little bit, take a little bit more moisture off, sharpen it yet again, and back to transferring over to the model. Start streaking that pigment down just like before. Just start working it like this. The soft gentle motion. And you're going to notice real quick how it starts to fan out. You get a feel for how this material responds relatively quick. It's not like oils when you blend them. Oils are a lot quicker. This you have to kind of brush a couple more times. But it's actually better that way because you have some really precise control over where that powder is actually going, and you can literally move these rust streaks as much as you want. Like if I wanted to keep working this up here, say I didn't like these streaks that much, I could just keep going back and blending them. Even a week later, if I let this set up, it would dry up nice and hard, and then I could literally go back and just wet it again and keep working it. It's a great little technique to achieve this kind of thing because you can just keep working it as much as you need. Now obviously I don't want to work this too much, and at first when it's wet the color is really concentrated, but you can see it does a really effective job of mimicking that heavy rust pitting that you get on the doors because there's so many raised surface areas and other parts of these cars, especially on the doors where a lot of that rust and grime will collect over time, and it starts to build up. You get these rust chips, and then you have these real large chunky rust streaks coming down. But the key with this kind of rust is it's not the wet kind of rust that you normally see or what we're normally used to doing on this channel. It's the dry powdery looking rust, and it's just a wonderful technique to be able to do this. It looks fantastic. So I'm going to repeat this on the opposite door now, and we're just going to keep moving along. And you can see I just put the brush down even for a few minutes, and it's not too bad yet. You can see I still have a little playtime on the brush, but I am going to go ahead and just pick up a little bit more since we got a little bit of an area. Try to control this a little bit more. Just go back in just like this. Add your powder where you want it. Alright, there's a dot, so we'll add a little bit up here, maybe a little bit there. And maybe just do a dot technique this time. Instead of actually painting those streaks, we just do it that way. And then we can just build up some little dots, right? Just like that. Instead of painting streaks, we can just do that. But, same procedure. You have complete control over the pigment. Just dry your brush out, go back, streak it down. Reactivates pretty much right away. That's what I was trying to say. So you have complete and total control over this powder. Keep streaking that down. It's going to start going over that track. Just like that. Keep fanning it. Okay. Let me see here. There we go. Very light feathering motions here too. I want to really clarify that. You can see the brush is barely gliding over that surface. If I take my hand, notice, very soft. Gently blending, you're not doing this, you're not putting pressure like you're actually painting something. Lightly, softly, blending. That's the key effect with this. And again, you got to make sure this brush isn't too wet, otherwise it's going to start bubbling up. The water will collect on the surface, it'll make a mess. It needs to be slightly damp, just enough to get the powders to spread. Alright, so as the side starts to progress, you see you get a lot of really nice fine streaks. And this is a perfect technique to model some of these kinds of box cars. This is very, very aggressive streaking, and we can tame this down a little bit. I will dull coat this in place to kind of seal it up a little bit, and that'll subdue some of the color. But you'll still get some really nice streaks. What we're going to work on now is the roof a little bit. I'm just going to pretty much apply a basic wash to the top. I started working on the top around the panel seams there, and you just got to really keep an eye that you don't get too much buildup here. However, if you do, again, you can keep kind of working it out a little bit with a wet brush. But I'm just going to try to blend this all back together and basically complete this model. Alright, for the roof I'm going to use this flat brush, and I'm going to apply a little bit of this same wash to the top, and I'm just going to see what it looks like here. Looks pretty good. I'm going to do basically little highlights like this. I'm going to go in kind of randomly. And now what I'm going to do real quick, while it's still a bit wet and pliable, I'm going to go ahead and start working it a little bit. I don't want to go as crazy with this wash as I did on the sides. This is just a highlighting technique. So I'm just going to go in, I'm going to start kind of fanning the wash out a little bit with another brush. This one is a little bit frayed out, so I can kind of work the bristles into the model a little bit. And it's not complete coverage, it's just going to spread it around, and most of this powder is going to still remain on the raised surfaces, similar to how rust kind of would be, but it's also getting into those deeper little crevices on these roof panels too, and it'll stretch out a little bit. If you're not fully satisfied with the effect the first time around, you can go back and add progressive little layers of this, but I'm not going to need too much. It's just going to be a varying effect, and I can go in, you know, and I can add more or less to some of these panels and just vary it up. But don't think about it that much. Just go in and just randomly apply the wash, because rust isn't coordinated in real life, as we know. It's very random, so you can really stretch this out. You can even see I can bring some of this and work it down to the next panel if I really want to. And I can blotch it on like that, and I can get that nice blotchy rust effect like this. There we go. Just keep working it down, and then you'll pretty quickly be able to gather a good little bit of this rust up. Let's go ahead and add a little bit more, just like that, not much, and then we'll quickly re-dampen my brush, clean it off a little bit, and retransfer the brush back over. Start working. Oops, sorry, it's getting out of frame here. Tilts a little bit so I can see it a little bit better. It's just more tedious, and you get tempted to want to work fast, but you do still gotta take the time to kind of work the color in on a bigger car like this. But if you really want to start maybe smaller, just do a 50-foot boxcar. Practice with the roof technique, maybe the rust technique a little bit, and see what you can kind of create with this. You can apply different colors too. You can use maybe a brighter rust, maybe a more subtle rust. What you could even do with this technique is let this whole thing set up, and you could go back and apply, say, another brighter color, maybe a darker color to diffuse this rust a little bit. And that'll get you a different effect, and you can just keep playing with this. There's 100,000 different ways you could really play with a pigment or a powder like that. Sorry about that, guys. There's so many different kinds of ways, but this is just really a sampling of what I'm talking about and how I'm kind of going about doing this whole technique. Let's go ahead and finish up the tie-in to the little panel seam at the top. I'm just going to take a fine tip brush, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to brush some of this powder right into that little seam there. And I just want to kind of blend it out a little bit, give us some of that color, and just work it down a little bit. And it'll start pulling in and catching some of that fresh application on the side too, and it'll start blending it together a little bit more. Not that I want this to all be one, even uniform color, but I just want to basically diffuse and blend that seam, the transition between the rust at the top into what it is on the roof, where it's a nice smooth transition, where it looks natural, where like the rust flowed down the side of the car, caught in this little lip, and then went down the sides naturally. That helps to kind of tie it together a little bit, and you can add a few little streaks if you want to. Color difference, maybe a little highlights, things like that. You can just keep playing with it a little bit. What do you say we tie up this roof a little bit? So we did the base powder effect. Note that this car has completely been dull coated now, and the great thing about doing the wash with the powder, you can see it still preserves that really nice deep color. So we have the color that we want, and we have the streaking effect that we want, but it hasn't been destroyed by the clear coat. It's a great way to do that. So anyways, on the roof, to finish it up, we did the base effect with the bright red rust color. Once it's been subdued a little bit, we have this. Now the base effect is good, but we're going to enhance it now with the rust pits. These roofs get really pitted on these box cars, and I like to use a variety of techniques, but the first one I'm going to do is use a frayed out brush like this, where I'm actually going to go in, I'm going to dip in to a little bit of fresh oil, some, what is that, burnt umber oil. And I'm going to go in, I'm going to start adding some random little pits like this, just kind of put these in like this, and I'm only going to do these 3 panels for demonstration, but you can see you just go in, pretty much paint them like that, come in with a fine tip brush like this, dip it in that fresh oil, non-diluted, it's not diluted down or anything, just go in, paint some dots just like that, and you get this really cool surface pitting effect. Very similar to what these cars have. Now the chassis version of these cars are even worse. They have really deep pitting, which you could actually refer to as salt chipping technique to do, and I actually have tried that before. And you can do all kinds of crazy effects with these roofs, but this is just a little sampling of one of the ways you could do this to get this really cool pitting effect. But you can see how well the two effects complement each other once you get in there and really do that. And you can go in there and render that a little bit. You can blend it out with some oil, but in this case I want to try to keep this full strength. This will settle down a little bit, but you can see I've got one half done, and you can see the amazing effect that it creates, where you get that really nice pitting. And you can of course layer some more rust over that, add some more color to it, do whatever you want. Sky's the limit. Now that all our roof work is dried, everything's looking way better. I really like the rust pits and everything on the roof. It really tied it together. The base rust effect is fantastic, and you can see it really ties all of our work together. And we now have a completed model that has the really realistic looking streaking. You can see again the dull coat has really toned things down. It's not as punchy and in your face, and it looks very subtle, and it's much more realistic than what we started out as. So you can see that this powder technique, using the wet wash technique, is a really great way to achieve these effects that maybe you otherwise can't get with just straight acrylic paint or oil paint. It's a great enhancer, if you will, for rust pits and rust streaks. On a darker colored car like this, where the rust is very intense. This is a very great technique to try. Hopefully this video inspires you guys to try maybe some of these techniques out on a car of your own. Of course, if you don't feel comfortable jumping in and putting this kind of weathering work on a newer model, or maybe a high-end tangent car like this, maybe get a scrap car, dull coat it, try some of this work out yourself, try to copy what I do in the video, and adapt the techniques to what you can do with your brushes and with your skills and with your materials, and see how the effect works for you. And you can adapt it from there and work it into something that you can actually use and transfer it. Once you get good at it, basically transfer those techniques to a model you actually want to make look good. And I think you'll be very surprised with what you can create with this kind of effect. This looks very complicated, but in reality it's not. It's just a little bit tedious at first, getting used to the feel, getting used to the technique, but once you get going, it actually is a lot of fun. And again, it really enhances these cars, because as you can see, compared to a model where I really didn't do that kind of effect, it's kind of bland. Now granted, there's some really cool graffiti, and the roof looks, you know, it looks kind of cool. It's got some neat little details here, but it doesn't pop out. The rust doesn't pop at you like it should, compared to on this model where it's right in your face. It's right there. You see it. It's just bright. You can tell that it's definitely been out in the sun and in the elements for years and years, like these CSX Boxcars pretty much all are. Matter of fact, I'm going to probably go back and use this technique on this car, and I'm probably going to use it on my third one as well that I have, and pretty much adapt that as well. But anyways, I want to thank you guys again for sticking around for this little weathering how-to. I'll have some more videos like this coming down the line, more projects and locomotive upgrades, real car builds, weathering videos, update videos, all kinds of stuff, and of course updates on the mile road that you can stay tuned to as well. In the meantime, thank you for watching this video, guys. I will see you in the next one, and take it easy.